Today on Upfront.
I don't think you heard me. I said the next governor of the state of Wisconsin.
Wisconsin's political shakeup.
It's time for a change. The voters of Wisconsin spoke, and they agree. A change is coming, Wisconsin.
State School Superintendent Tony Evers wins a tight race for governor as Democrats sweep other statewide offices. Next, incoming Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul on his win and his plans as Wisconsin's new top cop. Then, is it a power play? Assembly Speaker Robin Vos suggests Republican lawmakers might limit Tony Evers' power before Evers even takes office. I'll ask him how they would do that and if he thinks that's what voters want.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. So that didn't take long. Just hours after declaring victory in last week's election for governor, Democrat Tony Evers was reminded of his new reality. He'll be working with a legislature controlled by Republicans. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos set off a controversy when he suggested that Republican lawmakers might limit the powers of the new governor before he even takes office. Evers shot back, warning Vos and Republicans to stop any and all attempts to play politics and weaken the powers of the governor's office. We're talking about all of this now with the Speaker, Robin Vos of Rochester. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning.
So people saw you talking about limiting the powers of the governor. I guess my question would be, is that what the people of Wisconsin want you to do?
Sure. So first of all, if you look at what I actually said on the tape, my number one priority for a lame duck session is to make sure that we get pre-existing conditions put into state law. So the course of the campaign, when we saw a whole lot of lies, untruths told about where Republicans are on pre-existing conditions, that would become the law, so we didn't have to worry about going into January where anybody is concerned about pre-existing conditions if the Obamacare lawsuit is successful. So that's my main point of what I said. The fact that the Journal-Sentinel chose to sensationalize the idea that we should look at the balance of powers, make sure that things that were done under Governor Walker remain. That's what my voters elected me to do. So let me tell you a couple quick examples. Number one, voter ID. We passed voter ID. It went to federal court. Liberals like Tony Evers sued to overturn the law. And all of a sudden, the court came back saying it is constitutional, but here are some things you need to do to make sure that it meets that threshold. Governor Walker issued an executive order. They're in place today. The election went flawlessly. If we don't put those into the statutes, on day one, Tony Evers undoes that executive order and voter ID is in jeopardy. Number two, last week we got a waiver from Donald Trump to be able to have work requirements for folks that are on welfare. They didn't allow drug testing, but they certainly said you can have work requirements. Current law allows Governor Evers on day one to eliminate those work requirements for anybody on welfare. I strongly believe in that. Those are the kind of policies I want to put into place, make sure that Governor Evers can't repeal them on day one without the cooperation of the legislature, and make sure that we keep the success that Wisconsin has had going forward.
Why didn't you do this before? Why did you just figure that Scott Walker was going to be in office for a long time? Why?
Well, we just got the waiver. I mean, the waiver came last week, so we certainly have to do that.
But voter ID, for instance?
Well, that's because we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to go forward and talk about it after the election. And that's where we are right now. We knew we were going to put some of these things into place. We never really had an issue with Governor Walker in office, but we just want to codify them and make sure that they're going to stay. So if Governor-elect Evers is sincere about saying, let's sit across the table, negotiate from looking for common ground, I am happy to do that. But I want to make sure that the success that we've had doesn't become the first sticking point where we talk about things like voter ID. That's long settled law. We talk about work requirements for welfare. That is long settled. So let's put those into the statutes, make sure that we don't have any problems with it, and then move forward.
The argument might be, though, the voters of the state said they want Tony Evers to have his say in this process. Why shouldn't he have his say? Why are you trying to take away his ability to have a say in these issues?
Well, he would have a say. I mean, we still have an opportunity to sit down at the table. But number one, remember, Tony Evers is governor not because he got any kind of a mandate. There is no mandate for his agenda. He won the election, and I congratulate him on that. The outcome is not what I wanted, but I certainly am not going to forget that the rest of Wisconsin, outside of the people who live in Dane County and Milwaukee, want to make sure that we have that balance, and my job is to make sure that the policies that have made Wisconsin successful stay on the books and that we don't roll back all of the reforms that have us as one of the most successful economies in the country.
So that's the limit of what you want to limit the powers of the governor to? You want to do those things? Do you want to do other things?
Yeah, there are other things. Yeah, there are other things we're going to talk about. I mean, those are two of the easiest. Another one, WEDC. We know that Tony Evers has said that he might go back and look at the Foxconn deal. Look, I represent the area where Foxconn is. I am not going to allow incoming Governor Evers Evers to screw up the largest economic opportunity for the region that I represent in the state. So yes, I want to make sure that the deal that we have for Foxconn does not all of a sudden get changed. That was not an issue for the most part in this election, so let's keep it on what it was, pre-existing conditions, where we're going to fix to make sure that nobody thinks that what Tony Evers said is true, because we're going to pass that bill, and then we're going to have an opportunity to talk about things going forward and find areas of common ground.
So give me an example of common ground that you think you can find with the new governor.
Sure. I'll give you a bunch of examples because I think there are going to be quite a few. Number one, I had a task force last year on foster care. We know that there are over 6,000 children who are in foster care. We need to do a better job of making sure that we recruit more foster families to be in that system, make sure that we are able to fairly compensate those families. That's one area. Number two, we have successfully worked on the opioid crisis. My colleague John Nygren has the HOPE agenda. We have passed dozens of bills, but there's a lot more to do. So I'd be happy to work with him on the opioid crisis. Transportation. I think that we have an opportunity to reduce the amount of borrowing that we have, potentially raise some revenues, and put it into what he said that I agree with during the campaign, and that's going into roads and bridges and infrastructure.
But not mass transportation.
Not into empty buses, not into streetcars, not into all kinds of things with light rail. Those are a dead end, and they're never going to happen under me. But I certainly am open to working with him on roads and bridges. So I think there's a lot of areas that we can sit down, find the common ground that he said he wanted to do during the campaign, and I'm willing to do myself.
It seems like you are drawing some lines in the sand, though, already on a couple of key issues. He wants to spend more on public education, K through 12. He's talking about $1.4 billion. You've been quoted as saying that that's just not going to happen. Why not look at his budget, see how he would pay for it, rather than saying right now it's not going to happen?
Well, here's what I know. There was a new report out in the Journal-Sentinel today that showed that we have a little bit over $2 billion of projected new revenue to spend on all of the programs that we would like to do. I think that just continuing what we already have with the same increase. Remember, last year in the budget, even though Tony doesn't want to admit it, we actually had the largest increase in public education spending in our state's history. So I think if we duplicated that again, so had that same huge increase, but we still have a lot of other priorities, I think the only way that Governor-elect Evers is going to be able to do that is by massive tax increases. I'm never going to vote for a tax increase like that. So I think that's why I tried to be honest.
Any tax increase?
No.
No. Right now you're saying no?
Well, no income, no sales. I mean, I did say I'd look at the transportation potentially for more revenue for transportation, but we're not going to raise the income tax. We're not going to raise the sales tax. So if tax increases are off the table for the general fund, we have to take the money that we have and figure out how best to spend it.
What about Medicaid? 37 states now saying we want the expanded Medicaid. We just saw voters in 3 red states in the recent election cycle say that's what we want. You've said no to that. Why is that a bad idea? Wouldn't that free up money in the budget for other things like education?
No, it's just really a cost shift. So the way it basically works is Wisconsin already expanded Medicaid in a more creative way that allowed many more people to stay in the Obamacare exchanges. Remember, look, I don't support Obamacare, but it's the law of the land, so we have to utilize that. Under the Obamacare system, people who are above 100% of poverty get massive federal subsidies to be able to buy private sector insurance, where they pay rates that are actually not a loser for hospitals and doctors. The more people we put into Badger Care, because every single person on Badger Care does not actually pay the full freight of the services they receive from a doctor, a nurse, a chiropractor, a dentist. So there's a massive subsidy that has to happen in the private sector to make up for those who are on Badger Care. So why would I want to put more folks onto Badger Care, knowing that that would raise the private insurance rates and make our health care system even less stable than it currently is?
Let me ask you one other question. Yeah. There are a lot of referendums on marijuana, including some in your area, in Racine County. A lot of support for both recreational use and for medicinal use. Is that an area where you could find common ground with Governor Evers?
Yeah, so I have always supported medical marijuana. I've been very public before this election in saying that if we could have a system where somebody walks into a Walgreens, a CVS, a local pharmacy, and they can get a prescription filled for marijuana, just like they do for an opioid or a traditional prescription, I am all in favor of that. But having us become a Colorado where people break federal law, but they're not prosecuted, having a system where we already have too many opioids in our state, and now we all of a sudden make marijuana legal for recreational purposes, I don't know what that would benefit the productivity of Wisconsin. So I'm willing to look at medical marijuana if we can figure out an answer at the federal level and then figure out a better way to make it happen in Wisconsin.
Robin Vos is the Republican Speaker of the Assembly. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Mike.
And my interview with Speaker Vos continues now on our website, where we're talking more about how a new governor might affect the Foxconn deal. You'll find that on the Upfront section of WISN.com. Coming up next on Upfront, the new Attorney General. I'll talk with Democrat Josh Kaul about changes he'll make at the Department of Justice. And later, the election by the numbers, the parts of Wisconsin that propelled Tony Evers to victory and cost Governor Walker his job.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.